the Book of Kings, and this really is a continuation of the Book of Shmuel, because really the story of that Shmuel, the Book of Shmuel ends with, it really should have included maybe the first chapter of the Book of Kings. It's so really like is connected to the end of Shmuel, because we're dealing with David HaMelech passing away, and Shmuel and Shmuel dealt with the entire life of David, and so this is a little sliver of the end of his life that really would fit right there in the Book of Shmuel. But Yirmiyah, who wrote the book of Malachim, Yirmiyah, Jeremiah the prophet, wrote the Book of Kings. He specifically included it here, this part that obviously with divine inspiration, this part of the story of David is included, even though most of Kings is going to be from David HaMelech's son, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, and all the other of the 19 kings of Malchei Yehuda and Malchei Yisrael, the kingdom of Judah and the kingdom of Israel. So we will see, of course, as we learn the connection, why we do want to talk about the end of David's life. Now, the verse begins, the first verse in the Book of Kings, it begins, V'hamelech David zokein bo bayomim. King David was old and advanced in his years, and they covered him with garments, but he did not become warm. So here we have an elderly person. He's the end of his life. We happen to know that David HaMelech passes away when he's 70. And when it says that he's old and he's advanced in his years, the commentaries understand that he's now in his last year. He's already 70, and he is he's advanced in his years. Ben Shivim Shana Haya. The Radak mentions he's 70 years old already. Or 69. The idea that he's ba bayomim, he came in his days, is a topic of discussion. What does it mean he advanced? Ba bayomim, literally, I should say, literally means he came in his days. So we translated it to mean advanced in his years. He's old and he's ba bayomim, but the truth of the matter is it's redundant. He's if you say he's old and then you say advanced in his years, it would seem, it seems redundant. And the commentary,
when it's referred to by Abraham, wasn't there also some language there like that?
Yeah, there is. You're right. It uses a similar term. Zakein Baba, the same term, I should say. It uses the same term.
What do they say there?
Hashem Berech es Avram Bakoil. Avram was Zakein and Baba Yomim. And they use similar interpretations there as well. The idea that he made his days full, that every day he was able to account for, which is a real powerful message for everyone, that we should be able to account for every single day as not just old in age, but also in actions, that yesterday I accomplished this, and the day before I did that, and each day was well accounted for. And of course, we know that many righteous people, they used to write down have a diary of their, mitzvahs and their sins, things that they did correctly. And I don't mean sins that they actually did an act of sin, but sins meaning like they missed out in certain opportunities. They should have done this better. They should have done that better. And that's really what it means, Ba Bayomim, that he filled his days with good deeds. And
where was Abraham at that point in terms of his stage of life? Was he within it's recalling it. I'm trying to see if there's any connection as to, did Abraham have 2 years left, 10 years left, 5 years left? Are we winding up as we may be doing over here? You understand what I'm asking? How many years did Abraham have left after the Torah uses this wording to describe his status?
So that story by Abraham is right after the Akedah. So Abraham is 137 years old. And he tells, it's right by the story of having Eliezer make a promise that he's going to find, well, he's going to find a wife for Yitzchok. Now, the truth of the matter is, I'm saying he's 137, but really, Yitzchok doesn't get married until he's 40, and Avram's 140. So it's after the Akedah, means after he's 137 years old, but seemingly it was,
You still think he had 40 years left?
3 years. Sure,
38.
Abraham lived till 175. So he was like 140,
38 years
so he had
left.
35. Sorry, what did you say, Ezra?
38. 38
Yeah,
from,
the only thing is
from-
what I'm mentioning is that this actual promise, again, it's right after the Akedah, but it would seemingly be a few years after, because we know that that Eliezer didn't, he didn't search really until Yitzchok was 40. He married Rivka at 40. So it seemed that Abraham wasn't 137, he was already 140. And it has to do with the fact that Yitzchok, where was Yitzchok during those two years? There's understanding from Kabbalistic books that he was in Gan Eden at that time.
Getting repaired.
What he was in, that he reached a very high level of spirituality when he was brought as a sacrifice, and therefore there are two. It comes out that there's 2 years missing from Yitzchok's life, and it turns out that it has to do with the fact that he was in Gan Eden for those 2 years. Then afterwards comes back down here on earth, and Abraham gets him ready for finds him a wife. So in any event, the point is that there's about 35 years left to answer your question, Isaac. There's about 35 years left to when it talks about Abraham getting old. But here we're talking about David HaMelech, and the commentaries understand it to be at the end of his life. And it could be because the reason for this difference that you're seeing is because Abraham did live a very long life. So there's room to say that he's, he might not be 174 now, but he's still old. He's 140, but David HaMelech only lived 70 years. So when it says he was Zakein, but by Yomim, and we know Zakein and, an elderly person, there's a mitzvah to honor him, that's when he reaches the age of 70 and so on. So the idea that he's old and he's, he's advanced, that's how the commentaries understand it to mean that he's close to his passing. And as we see that there's not much left over here to the story of David HaMelech. Yes, Ben.
King David spent so much time fighting in the wars that he probably felt like 100.
So the commentaries discuss that idea that you're mentioning, but not in connection with he felt like 100. But the reason why was David cold? They covered him with garments, but he did not become warm. Why is that? So they mention what you just said, Ben, that because he had such suffering in his life, that when he basically became old, it hit him. It all hit him. It all, the whole, whatever could go wrong went wrong.
He was worn down too.
He was worn out. He became frail
from the walls.
Yet Yet there are also midrashim which talk about his vigor at that age and the fact that he had not lost any of his youthful vigor at that age. And
That's Moshe Rabbeinu.
specific examples. No, it was definitely David HaMelech. Moshe also, but David HaMelech specifically. And okay, whatever.
We'll have to
He
look and
didn't-
find. We'll have to find those midrashim. The common understanding is that David is now bedridden, and he's not able to move. This is why Adoniyahu now is going to try to start a final rebellion. The final rebellion, based on the fact that David is very weak and can hardly move. He's not involved so much anymore in the kingdom matters. He's involved in the spiritual matters, but not so much in the kingly matters. So that's the common understanding here. But I don't know every medrash, so it's possible if you know of you want to find it, that would be interesting to see. So here we're talking about David not being warm in his old age, and even though they brought garments to warm him, they brought blankets and any way they could to warm him, but he was not becoming warm. Now, Ben mentioned this reason why he's not becoming warm because of a natural matter, because he was so weakened from all the torture that his body went through, from all the stress and situations that he went through. So that would be like a natural reason why he became worn out and why his body no longer felt the warmth that it used to. But we've talked about another reason why his body became cold in his old age, and that had to do with the fact that he cut off the corner of a garment of Shaul HaMelech. Even though he was being chased by Shaul, and even though Shaul wanted to kill him, and according to halacha, according to Jewish law, he had a reason why he would be allowed to kill Shaul, to kill Saul. Nevertheless, on his level, he understood that Shaul was a tzaddik, even though he was misguided. But he understood, which is a very interesting concept, that person could be a tzaddik and yet have something, be misguided in his thinking, or have some type of a ruach ra, some evil spirit that caused Saul to go after David. And David wanted to stop this whole mess, so he cut off the corner of the garment of Shaul HaMelech, trying to show him that I could have killed you. Why don't you stop bothering? Why are you thinking that I'm a traitor and I am rebellious against you? I could have killed you. Look, I even have the corner of your garment. And he had a very good reason to do that. And yet, the understanding of the Chazal, of the rabbis, is that the understanding of the comment of the Talmud is that because he did that, he was actually punished, that garments did not warm him. Now, as he misused the garment of Saul, therefore he was punished measure for measure, that the garments did not warm him. So this is a Talmudic understanding, which it really deserves for us to change our perspective of what, the holiness. We have to understand it, because on the surface level, this type of interpretation sounds strange. David HaMelech did something that there's nothing wrong with. Cut off the corner of his of Shaul's garment, and to save his life, and to save his life in the future. It was considered a sin that he's going to not be warm in his old age. So it sounds very hard to understand, but in order to understand it, you have to realize that, again, we're dealing with David HaMelech, who was on such a level where he should have understood that this is all coming from Hashem, and he shouldn't be doing anything of this sort. in addition to the fact that cutting off the corner of the garment of Shaul was causing Shaul not to wear tzitzis, because in those days, the garment that they wore was a four-cornered garment, and that was their tzitzis. So until he was able to get new tzitzis, make another, that garment, he could no longer have tzitzis on because the corner was cut off, and it was basically no longer considered possible to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis because the tzitzis was cut off, and they would need to make new tzitzis and in order to be fulfilling the mitzvah. So he caused Shaul not to fulfill that mitzvah of tzitzis for however long it took until they got Shaul another pair. Now the third reason why he's not being able to be warmed up, what got him to be so worn out and so weak and cold, so it has to do also with what we just learned, the final matter of Shmuel and in Shmuel Beis, what we learned that David HaMelech had seen the angel of death with his sword. When the angel of death was calling was going around to kill with the plague. If you remember, there were 3 punishments, and David chose the punishment of the plague. And even though it lasted a very short time, David HaMelech saw the angel of death, and he was very shaken by it. That vision had an impact on him, and it caused him to be very nervous and afraid and weak, and ended up having this effect that he wasn't able to overcome that weakness, and he was cold in his old age from seeing that angel of death with regard to his sin. And now, talking about the sin, there is something I did want to mention while we're at it, because it was one last little vart that I wanted to mention on Shmuel Beis, and that is, we mentioned there that there was a sin that the Jewish people did, that they ran after different rebellions. They went after Avshalom's rebellion. Almost all the Jewish people went after Sheva ben Bichri's rebellion. They chose the rebellious person versus David. Isaac asked the question, how did they know who was the right one to go with? There were questions about King David. It was a very good question. So I was thinking about it, even though I did give one answer the last time, but thinking about it, I think there might be another answer. And that is that the story at the end of Shmuel Beis mentions 2 sins. First, Hashem was angry because of the sin that they followed different rebellions. And then that caused Hashem to cause that there would be another sin where David counted the Jewish people in an inappropriate manner. Now, why didn't Hashem just punish the Jewish people right away? Instead, Hashem caused the first sin, to cause another sin, and then Hashem said, now I'm going to punish you. So I was thinking maybe this will answer Isaac's question, that when the Jewish people followed the rebellious individuals, it could be that they really thought that they were the righteous ones. They thought Sheva ben Bichri was righteous, and Avshalom was a very, very charismatic personality, and he made himself look like a scholar, and he rubbed elbows with all the great scholars of his time. He really, played the game very well, very smooth, and knew how to bake it, all the way through. And they could have claimed, we were very convinced that these were the right people. So Hashem then did not punish them. He waited for them to do another sin. The other sin was when David was counting the Jewish people, and here no one protested. No one got up and said, oh, this is wrong, we shouldn't do this, let's question it. When it came to the other situation, they left David to go after Avshalom and Sheva ben Bichri. So now, when they're not, they're not putting up a fuss against the counting, that's when Hashem says, so you have the koyach. If you think something's wrong, you stand up. So why didn't you stand up over here? Why didn't you stand up when I'm counting the Jewish people? If they wouldn't have done anything, anything major, they would have stayed with David, or they would have, not chosen to go with the enemy, with the rebellious person. I mean, so then, they could have said, oh, we're just, we don't mix in. The government is the government, we're not mixing in, we're following whatever, But here they chose to go after the enemy, to go after the rebellious person. So here Hashem says, now I'm going to punish you for the previous sin, because if you have the ability, if you're of the type that you're going to stick up for what's right, and you thought that this was right, so why didn't you think about this and may have an opinion about this? Why didn't you fight against what they were doing with regard to this? So that's why Hashem said, yeah, you're right. If you would have really believed that they were the right people, I wouldn't punish you. But now that you show that you you choose what you like to fight for, you were basically going after your own interests, and maybe you thought things would be easier, but you weren't choosing based on what's right and what's wrong. Now Hashem says, well, then you get punished for not following David HaMelech. So anyway, that's a little vart.
If you're still interested in the pasuk from the Gemara, I found it.
Yeah, what is the pasuk?
It says, Amar Rav, Mai dechtiv kol arum yaaseh bedaat uksi lifros ivelet.
Okay.
And then they say, kol arum yaaseh bedaat ze David.
Yeah.
דכתיב ויאמרו לו עבדיו יבקשו לאדוני המלך נערה בתולה. And then the people brought their daughters to him because they knew he's only looking for one.
Right. Gotcha.
But with Achashverosh, he wanted so many, nobody wanted to send their daughters there.
Very good. Okay, Shkoyach. Very good. Thank you, Ben. So the first pasuk here, we just learned, we mentioned why the garments were not warming David HaMelech. We have a few interpretations, and now we're up to verse 2. And verse 2 says, his servants, this is what Ben just mentioned, that they learned it in the morning class, that his servants said to him, let there be sought for my lord the king a young virgin who will stand before the king and be his attendant, and she will lie in your bosom, and it will be warm for my lord the king. And basically, this has to do with the fact that they asked doctors what to do for the king. The king was so uncomfortable and shivering that they didn't know what they could do for the king. And the doctors said that the only thing that could warm him is if he had a young girl that would basically warm him. And verse 3 tells us that they sought a beautiful girl throughout the boundary of Israel, and they found Avishag the Shunamis and brought her to the king. And this girl was from the city of Shunam, which is in the portion of Benjamin, and they brought her to the king to be this girl that would give him some respite from his sickness of being cold, and give him a little warmth. Now, this was a very questionable situation. Now, this does not sound Jewish. It sounds like something maybe in the 21st century. What exactly is going on here? David HaMelech has some issue with, feeling cold, and the doctors say, well, if he had a girl that was with him, he might, feel some type of warmth. and that would help him. And this went in front of the rabbinic court. The rabbis, David HaMelech, did not just say do it, even though it would have possibly helped his health situation. He had this brought before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court. And the Jewish court, they asked them, is this appropriate? Because this is not something of tznius. This is not, generally, we would never do such a thing. In fact, there are cases where a man has a crush over a certain girl, and the Talmud discusses, would it be allowed for him to touch the girl just to calm down? Because according to Jewish law, we don't touch a girl that we're not married to. And the Talmud talks about seeing her, touching her. Would these be allowed to relieve a man if he's like sick love over a certain girl? If he has a certain sick love, what I mean by that is like he's sick because of his tremendous lust for this person. It's a chelas ahava in the Hebrew. I'm just translating literally from the Hebrew, but maybe it's not a good
mental issue.
It was sort of like a tremendous lust over an individual, and the Talmud says that's absolutely unsneous, immodest, and it's not allowed. And so here we have David HaMelech in this same quandary of would this be allowed? And you would think that it would definitely be prohibited. And yet the Sanhedrin paskin that in his situation of sickness, this would actually be acceptable. And of course, the later scholars try to figure out how to differentiate between the Talmudic case where it's prohibited, such a thing, and even though the person might die because of it, we still wouldn't allow a Jewish woman, a Jewish girl, to be treated in an immodest way with someone who she's not married to.